This dessert has its origins in pre-Christian traditions, but the modern version has only been around for a few hundred years. While it's usually done as a log shape, newer creations have a more avant-garde approach to the dessert. We're going back to the sweets table and getting a second helping of the Yule log. I'm Glenn Warren, and welcome to another serving of Seasons Eatings, the podcast which explores the history and origins of your favorite Christmas foods. Seasons Eatings can be found wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And if you haven't already, I would ask you to subscribe. That way you won't miss an episode when it's released, and all future episodes will be available without you having to search for them. And if you can please take a minute and leave me a 5-star review, I would greatly appreciate it. Reviews help others find the podcast and help me know that you're enjoying what I'm doing. And if you let me know you've left a review, I'll send you a Seasons Eatings sticker as a personal thank you. Seasons Eatings is also found on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links can be found in the show notes, which also can be found on seasonseatingspodcast.com. And while you're there, you can buy me an eggnog. Just click on the little cup in the corner and leave a donation for as little as $3. Each donation is used for the running of the podcast and its general upkeep, so any help will be wonderful. And finally, you can let me know how I'm doing, leave a suggestion for a future episode, or just say hi at seasonseatingspodcast@gmail.com. Welcome to the bonus episodes for the Burr months of the year. In previous seasons, I've done something called side dishes and focus on foods or ingredients that don't necessarily get the main focus during the holidays. This year, I thought I'd do something a little different, and I'm calling it the Second Helpings. I'm reheating an old episode and giving a little bit more history and depth. This time, I'm diving a little deeper into the history of the Yule log. The Yule log cake, or a bûche de Noël for French speakers, is an elaborate creation consisting of a rolled, filled sponge cake, usually frosted with buttercream to look like tree bark and festooned with meringued mushrooms, marzipan, holly sprigs, sugar cobwebs, and any sort of edible decoration. As a dessert, the Yule log is relatively recent, unlike the tradition from which it is derived. The history of the Yule log cake stretches all the way back to Europe's Iron Age, before the medieval era. Back then, Celtic Brits and Gaelic Europeans would gather to welcome the winter solstice at December's end. People would feast to celebrate the days finally becoming longer, signaling the end of the winter season. The Yule log sprang from the ancient Celtic tradition of celebrating the winter solstice by locating and retrieving an enormous tree trunk, often still with the roots attached, and burning it on the shortest day of the year. The act was a way to celebrate the rebirth of the sun, as well as give thanks for the warmth and life it would bring with it. The Celts believed that certain trees, specifically oak, beech, elm, and cherry trees, had certain mystical powers. Often they would use the part of the log to make a wedge for the plow as good luck for the next harvest. To cleanse the air of the previous year's events and to usher in spring, families would burn the logs decorated with holly, pine cones, or ivy. Wine and salt were often used to anoint the logs. Once burned, the log's ashes were valuable treasures said to have medicinal benefits and to guard against evil. Some groups claimed the ashes would protect the bearer from lightning, an important quality at the time. For several centuries, in fact, it has been customary on Christmas Eve to burn a very large log in the hearth, which must burn very slowly. The ideal being that it can last for the 12 days of the cycle until the new year, or at least for 3 days. The log should preferably come from a fruit tree trunk of the south, that is a plum, cherry, or olive, which is supposed to guarantee a good harvest for the following year. But also it could come from oak or beech in the north, since acorns and beech nuts were food for men until the end of the Middle Ages. When lighting, the log is blessed with a branch of boxwood or laurel, preserved since Palm Sunday. And when burning, the log is, in some region, sprinkled with wine to ensure a good harvest, or with salt to protect against witches. Its embers are often kept in order to protect the house from lightning or the devil, and the ashes are spread in the fields to fertilize the earth. The charcoal from the burnt logs were also kept all year round and used in the composition of several remedies. Lit with embers from the previous Christmas log or the past St. John's Day, its ashes served as protection for the whole household until the following year. With the advent of Christianity, the Yule log tradition continued, albeit on a smaller scale. Families may have burned a log on Christmas Eve, but smaller hearths became the norm, so huge logs were impractical. Those small hearths, however, were perfect for baking cakes. Now, we don't know who exactly made the first Yule log cake, but judging from the individual ingredients, it could have been as early as the 1600s. Marzipan and meringue decorations, two of the most popular choices for Yule logs, appeared on many medieval tables. Sponge cake, which often constitutes the base of the log, is one of the oldest cakes still made today, and it dates back to about 1516, when the first known recipe appeared in Gervase Markham's tome, The English Housewife. Nowadays, there are different Bûche de Noël traditions. Various regions of France have their own traditions. In Provence, they say, "Hide the old fire, light the new fire. God fills us with joy." The oldest member of the family then sprinkles the wood either with milk or honey in memories of the delights of Eden, or with wine in memory of the vine cultivated by Noah during the renovation of the world. In Marseille and throughout Provence, when carrying the Christmas log, you repeat 3 times, "Christmas is coming, all good is coming." Then the head of the family, or in his absence, the eldest, advances towards the log to bless it, pours wine on it while invoking the Holy Trinity, saying, "In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen." And then he sets the log on fire. In Burgundy, the father of the family ordered a child to go to some corner of the room to pray to God that the stump gives sweets. During this time, small packets of sweets or candied fruit and nuts were placed at the bottom of each end of the log, which the children came to collect, believing in good faith that the stump had given them. The sweets were hidden in a hole in the trunk of the log, closed with a cork, or in the corner under the log. And the wine grower who did not have to offer sweets to the children could put prune or chestnuts underneath. In Scotland, it's considered good luck to carve the face of the Cailleach, the Gaelic goddess of the winter months, into a log before burning it on Christmas Eve with the whole family. The ritual has a way of saying goodbye to the cold, darkness, and hardships of the past year while preparing for a new beginning. People would also use the log as a way to predict events for the upcoming year. They would hit the burning log with tongs, and embers emitted would tell them what the harvest would be like. The more embers, the more corn. The fire was red, and predictions were made for the coming year based on the sparks and flames they saw, like how many chickens or calves would be born, marriages in the family, health and wealth, etc. If the fire casts a shadow on the wall, there would be a death in the family that year. That custom actually continued in France and Quebec until the late 19th century. However, hearths eventually got smaller and turned to stoves, and the Yule log became a smaller branch placed in the center of a Christmas table. It was surrounded by friandises, or little sweets and delicacies that were given to guests as treats. There are a couple of stories about how we get to a cake coming from a burning wood log. One was that the Yule log was supposed to burn the whole evening, a minimum of 12 hours. Now, depending on how big the log is, the log always wouldn't burn that long. So a cake in the shape of a log was invented as a way to stretch it out. There's also the more reasonable suggestion that the cake came into being because houses were no longer being built with fireplaces, so there was nowhere to burn an actual log. So the cake was invented. The cake in shape of a Christmas log is still sometimes called a coquille, or a small log at the beginning of the 20th century. The old name of the cake seems to be derived from the word cognier, rather than the word bûche, although this etymology is not really certain. In Belgium on Christmas Eve, mothers place a cake called a cougneau or cougnole on the bedside of their children's beds. It's an oblong piece of pastry hollowed out in its upper and middle part in order to receive or contain a small baby Jesus made of plaster or sugar. And in some parts of Lorraine, similar cakes are also called cognier. But the best story has to do with Napoleon I. During his reign, Napoleon realized there were a lot of diseases in Paris. His solution was to mandate all chimneys remain closed during the winter months, because the cold, drafty air was causing all this inconvenient illnesses. With chimneys closed, there's no way for air to get in. Now, people were in a pickle. They had no way to burn their traditional bûche de Noël. So a Parisian baker got creative and invented the cake as a symbolic alternative to the actual pieces of wood. We'll find out who revived the tradition of the Yule log after the break. Don't you wish the holidays would last the entire year? Well, now it can. Head on over to mymerrychristmas.com where you can enjoy the holidays all year long. You can chat with other Christmas enthusiasts on any topic you can think of. Movies, books, cooking, decorating, anything. If it's about Christmas, it's here. Joining My Merry Christmas is completely free. But if you become a Premier member, you can enjoy extra bonuses such as a yearly Christmas card exchange and Kringle Radio, Santa's exclusive Christmas radio station. For only $19.95, you can become a Premier member of mymerrychristmas.com for a full year. So head on over to mymerrychristmas.com and start enjoying Christmas all year long.
Hi, this is Scott from Holly Jolly Xmasu, your podcast destination for Japanese Christmas music. If you like Christmas music and are tired of the same old songs, this is the podcast for you. Join me each month as I explore my collection of Yuletide albums from Japan, featuring everything from city pop to 80s rock, long-lost jazz, and psychedelic garage rock. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. It's some of the greatest Christmas music you've never heard.
By the 18th century, the Yule log had declined in popularity. Perhaps because it was impractical to carry a huge piece of wood home. Parisian pastry chefs, however, kept the tradition alive by reimagining the Yule log as a cake. The first recipe for the Yule log was written by Pierre Lacam in Le Mémorial historique et géographique de la pâtisserie, a voluminous work published in 1890 that contains historical anecdotes and 1,600 recipes for regional cakes and pastries. Lacam does not mention the origins of the edible log, but does provide a recipe for it. It essentially consists of a roll of genoise, which is a rich, airy biscuit, assembled with coffee or chocolate-flavored buttercream to create a log, then decorated with small branches cut from other pieces of genoise, secured with buttercream and topped with a further layer of buttercream using a fluted nozzle to create the effect of bark. And while today's bûches are often made from a chocolate Swiss roll, it was more common in the 19th century to use a vanilla sponge cake to accentuate the contrast between the outer bark, which was darker, and the pale inner wood. The woody effect could then be enhanced by the addition of mousse in the form of finely chopped pistachios and a few meringue mushrooms for good measure. In a later publication, Lacam revealed that he had discovered more about the bûche's origins. It was supposedly invented by Antoine Charbot at Maison-Quier in 1879. At the turn of the century, this Parisian pastry chef had created a French buttercream by whipping egg yolks with sugar syrup and butter, a version that Lacam used in his own recipe. By 1886, the bûche was all the rage in the French capital, particularly among the city's growing bourgeoisie. According to Michael Crondall, author of Sweet Invention, A History of Dessert, middle-class Parisians consumed extravagant desserts to illustrate their sophisticated taste and refinement, qualities previously attributed mainly to the aristocracy. Whatever the reason, the cake does date back to the Victorian era, sometime around 1870, suggested by its ingredients and written records. It became fashion in the 19th century to serve similar thinly rolled sponge cakes with jam or cream filling and covered with buttercream. Around that time, the Parisian middle class had more access to the countryside because of railroads and tourism. In the Victorian era, and especially in France, there was a tendency to romanticize peasant traditions, such as the bûche de Noël. The cake may have been an urban reflection of the provincial Yuletide tradition. Conversely, another written mention of the bûche de Noël is in Alfred Suzanne's La cuisine anglaise et la pâtisserie, published in 1894. He says it was a speciality of someone named Ozanne, possibly his friend Achille Ozanne. However, according to Stéphane Bonnat, her great-grandfather Félix Bonnat, a chocolatier, had a recipe collection from 1884 that included a roll cake made with chocolate ganache. She doesn't say it was the very first bûche de Noël, though. In the early 20th century, recipes for bûches began to appear in cookbooks. Home cooks tended to approach the cake with some trepidation, the greatest difficulty being rolling the cake without it cracking or breaking. In the 1960s, British writer Fanny Craddock reassured her readers that this difficulty could be avoided if they followed her detailed instructions to the letter, namely, let the cake cool completely before filling and rolling it. Conversely, in his cookbook, Sweet Paris, Frank Adrian Barron instructs readers to roll the cake for his white chocolate and black currant version while it's still warm. Then let it cool for 20 minutes before filling. He does, however, admit to shedding a tear trying to perfect the recipe. Connick MacLeod, the Scottish baker, advises whisking the egg yolks and sugar until they are velvety and creamy. It's a process, he says, that should be taken slowly. 2 to 3 minutes is needed to achieve the perfect result. And most importantly, he says, it is customary to leave a portion for the 8 goddesses of the Catholic to thank them for their protection throughout the winter months. Now, the cake is most popular in parts of Quebec, Canada, Belgium, and France, although some American families are partaking in the tradition. The cake used is usually a Genoise sponge cake, or other moist, rich, yellow cakes. It's baked in a flat jelly roll pan and frosted with some kind of ganache or buttercream. The flat piece of cake is then rolled into a cylinder, covered in chocolate frosting or buttercream, and textured either with a fork, a serrated knife, or a piping bag to resemble tree bark. Another way to make the cake is with multiple pieces of Genoise. The layers are spread with filling and placed one on top of the other and carved into the shape of a log. Similar to making a layered cake and just carving out a log shape. Smaller pieces of cake are then stuck onto the main roll and covered in icing to represent trimmed branches. These days, the focus is on the flavors and textures of the different layers rather than the resemblance of the original bûche. In Montreal, La Bête à Pain produced the signature bûche, which features dark chocolate mousse, vanilla crème diplomate, toasted hazelnuts, salted caramel, praline crunch, and a chocolate biscuit. Less traditional flavors like strawberry and rhubarb are also popular at the Canadian city's bakeries. In Paris, many luxury hotels have opened Christmas boutiques where you can order elaborate bûches to go or to have them delivered, with competition fierce among pastry chefs, looking to outdo each other in terms of taste and design. In 2022, for example, Maxime Chadwick of Cheval Blanc took his customers back to their childhood with a bûche de Noël that wasn't shaped like a bûche, but rather like a gift packaged placed at the foot of a chocolate rocking horse, made from hazelnuts from Maxime Frederick's family farm. The gift consisted of dacquoise, praline, shortbread mousse, and vanilla caramel. At Le Royal Monceau, Raffles, Paris, Quentin Le Chat created 5 versions, none of which resembled the original bûche. The angular minimalist bars came in a range of bold flavors, including buckwheat, salted caramel, and apple tatin. Adrian Bozzolo of the Mandarin Oriental in Paris teamed up with perfume maker Givaudan to create a fan-shaped bûche filled with dark chocolate cream, ioken, which is a Japanese citrus fruit, and ginger. But can these creations still be considered Yule logs? The answer is really up for debate. For some, the term yuge simply refers to the inspiration behind a dessert and the season it is which to be eaten, rather than a reference to a specific cake made according to unchanging recipes. Regardless, whether it's a traditional Yule log or a gift package placed at the feet of a chocolate rocking horse, the Yule log is a Christmas tradition that's here to stay. Whatever style cake is eaten, the bûche de Noël still does one thing. It brings families together at Christmas. They may not be telling their fortunes from flames or spreading ashes in fields, but they're celebrating their togetherness at Christmas time. Thank you for listening to this serving of Seasons Eatings. Seasons Eatings is found wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And please, if you leave a review about the show so we can spread the Christmas cheer. And also, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email at seasonseatingspodcast@gmail.com to let me know how you like the show, or make a suggestion for future episodes, or just to say hi. And if you left a review, I'll send you a Seasons Eating sticker for your trouble, as well as my unwavering gratitude. If you're feeling extra generous this season, you can buy me an eggnog. Head on over to seasonseatingspodcast.com, click on the little cup in the corner. Each small donation helps with the daily running of the podcast and is greatly appreciated. All music used on Seasons Eatings is used under Creative Commons license.